Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome Jack Kemp Foundation President, Jimmy Kemp.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. My name is Jimmy Kemp. I'm president of the Jack Kemp Foundation, and we are so grateful that you all have taken time out of your busy schedule to join us at Audi Field in Southwest Washington, D.C., in an opportunity zone. By the end of the night, you're going to know a lot more about opportunity zones, and hopefully that applause will be much more enthusiastic and genuine. But we are so grateful to have you here. And as everyone takes their seats, we want you to know how much we appreciate you all for recognizing how special my dad was to you and to so many. And this is a heartwarming experience to stand up in front of so many people with so much goodwill, not only for my dad, but most importantly, for the American idea. So we want to start off the evening with a gentleman who served 22 years as he's a retired 22-year Army Lieutenant Colonel. His name is D.C. Washington. And D.C. he's sung the national anthem at sporting events all over the country. Well, actually, mostly in D.C. He's very rooted here in D.C., something that we're going to hear about a lot from Senator Ben Sasse in a little while, rootedness. And D.C. Washington is rooted in Washington, D.C., but he grew up in southern Arkansas, in the segregated South. And D.C. told me about a song that he learned in the segregated South. He told me it's called the Negro National Anthem. So as D.C. Washington comes up, he's going to sing two songs for us, and I'd like you to rise as he sings what is known as the Negro National Anthem and our nation's national anthem. Please welcome D.C. Washington.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet
You can take a seat. D.C., Washington. Thank you, D.C. That's the way you start a dinner, I think. So, D.C., when the national anthem controversy was going on, D.C. was asked to sing the national anthem at Nationals Park, which is right across the way. You can see it out the window. And so D.C. sang the national anthem, sang God Bless America, and sang Lift Every Voice and Sing on Black Heritage Day at Nats Park. And it was around the time of the anthem protests. And D.C. said that he understood why the kneeling was happening. But he was taught to stand and sing the national anthem with pride. He served our country. And D.C. said that Lift Every Voice and Sing provides the vision for the more perfect union that the national anthem points us to. And that's why I thought it would be incredibly appropriate for this evening. We are all here in order to build a more perfect union. Before you get started on your salads and your food, I would like to ask Rabbi Levi Shem Tov to come join us and give the prayer. Rabbi Shem Tov is the nation's capital rabbi. He is with an organization called Chabad. Did I get that close, Marcy? I'm a goy. But Rabbi Shem Tov is the nation's capital rabbi. He is a wonderful man, an incredible minister to the Jewish community and people, anybody who would come to him. We're very honored to have him. Please welcome Rabbi Levi Shem Tov. Thank you.
We gather here to honor the visionary pioneer Sean Parker and to remember and celebrate the lifetime of a great American, the Honorable Jack Kemp, an all-star in more ways than one. He brought a nobility to public service and discourse and a special sense of sportsmanship to all the roles of the unique journey of his life. Perhaps we need to remember one of Jack's greatest traits, that of moderation. The magic of America is not that we are all the same, for we are not, but that we believe we all have the same rights. First and foremost, the right to our own opinion and the respectful, appropriate expression of that opinion. The Talmud speaks of two great sages, Shammai and Hillel, who argued aggressively. Today, the Jewish people live almost exclusively by the opinion of Hillel. Not only was Hillel more lenient, seeing potential as opposed to only the here and now, he would always mention the opinion of his opponent Shammai first, then his own, even as he disagreed with that opinion of Shammai, in order to accord it respect, even if he then sought to vigorously oppose it. And his way endures to this day. That gift, to accept the right of those with different opinions while maintaining our own, is evaporating, and we really need it back. Much deep wisdom can be discerned from our mothers and grandmothers, even from those magnets on their refrigerators. Mine has one which says, "What you are born is God's gift to you. What you become is your gift to God." God, you gave Jack Kemp many gifts in his life, and Jack Kemp gave you many gifts back. He supported your children, the people of Israel, vigorously and without fear, and he helped strengthen America, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth. And he inspired, earned the real respect of, and even mentored many of today's leaders along the way. So as an American and as a Jew, I feel a special and unique gratitude to Jack Kemp. And I ask that on this night, when we remember his lifetime and his work, we each try to emulate the moderating voice he brought to the great debates, and ask that you, God, help us see the wisdom in doing so. By each of us knowing that we are not all alike, and not all are like we are, but we remember that we are nevertheless all one, together, a nation under you. May we see only brighter and better days ahead. God bless America.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well, you may be wondering what you're doing inside of a soccer stadium. Didn't Jack Kemp play football? Didn't his son Jeff play football? I played a little bit of football. Yes, the Kemp family is a football family. But this opportunity to be in a sports venue and to be able to be with friends and have an incredible evening celebrating what the rabbi just prayed about to God, that we would become more unified, not less. The people in this room are people who can help that happen and have already helped that happen, and we will hear about that throughout the evening. So the Jack Kemp Foundation, it started shortly after my dad passed away in 2009. And being here at Audi Field in an opportunity zone, in a sense, is full circle. One of my dad's main policy ideas is enterprise zones. And enterprise zones was a concept that drove Dad because he understood that capitalism without capital is nothing but an ism. There has to be capital for capitalism to work. So poor communities that have not received capital, they need investors. They need folks who see the human potential and are looking to, yes, make money. And the people who are in distressed communities, they recognize, hey, we've got a chance. Somebody's going to take a risk. They're going to give me an opportunity, but I've got to prove myself to them. What God has given me, I've got to do something with. So at the Kemp Foundation, we love focusing on stories of hope and opportunity, but all of this is made possible by so many people in this room, and we are incredibly honored to have many of them here. I'd like to start off by recognizing a few of our special guests, and go ahead and eat. I'm sorry, I should have said that. The food's been blessed. You can start eating your salads. You can hold your applause to the end, but I'd like to recognize Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito and his wife, Martha Ann, who are here with us, Senator Ben Sasse, who you'll be hearing from in a little bit, Senator Tim Scott, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and his wife, Candy Ben Carson. We have Senator Todd Young, and we're going to be hearing later from Ivanka Trump, who's seen fit to join us this evening, and we're so grateful for that. And we also have one other incredible friend to my dad and my mom and our whole family. Larry Kudlow is here. And Larry called me up before the dinner and he said the same thing that he told me 8 years ago when we started the Kemp Foundation. Jimmy, you're going to talk about 3 things. Jimmy, the Kemp Foundation should be about 3 things. Number 1, Kudlow, what is it? Growth. Number 2, growth. And number 3, growth. Economic growth is the key to opportunity for all, and we have many issues to deal with. Our society has many challenges. But But in order to address those challenges, you've got to be able to attack the inequality of opportunity and the importance of people understanding that to achieve all that God has created them to be, they need to work hard and find their calling, their place in society to make things better. Now, another highlight of this evening is that my mom gets to be here and see so many friends from throughout her few years on this earth. And right now, I would like my whole family, all the Kemp family, to stand up and be recognized. And yes, that includes you, Mom. So you have Joanne, Jeff, my wife Susan behind them, Jonah and Marco, and Tommy and Benji are somewhere. Tommy and Benji, oh, right there. Hi, boys. Now, I need somebody else to stand. I've got a sister in this audience. I have two sisters, but neither of them are here. Marcy Robinson is my sister. She's already standing. But Marcy is an incredible friend to us, has been for so many years, a great friend of the foundation, and she's one of many former Kemp staffers who are here. Kemp staffers, would you please stand up? Kemp, if you ever worked for Jack Kemp, you need to stand up and be recognized. Baker, that means you, wherever you are. And then finally, I'd like the Jack Kemp Foundation board members to stand up and be recognized. My brother Jeff is one. We have Ron Slimp right here. Did Merritt make it down? I don't see Merritt Thomas. She's coming. She's on her way down from New York. And Caesar Conda. Thank you all for helping us. Ron, thank you for being here. Jeff, thank you for your wisdom. It's awesome to have your brother on the board, your older brother. Jeff has been through a lot of the things that we're doing at the Kemp Foundation, and he's a great advocate for me and counsel to me. So you all are among family, and you're part of the extended Kemp family. That's what this evening is about. And we've gathered to honor Sean Parker. Sean, he's going to tell the story, but 6, 7, 8 years ago, Sean Parker was out in California. He had a little bit of money in his pocket, and he said, hey, I'd like to reinvest this money. And he recognized that he was going to be taxed penally through capital gains if he reinvested his money. And so I'm not sure that anybody else in this room would have done this, but his natural next thought somehow was, I think I'll change the US federal tax code. Now, the person who's the namesake of this foundation, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to simplify the tax code, and enterprise zones was his idea, not because he thought enterprise zones were the end-all be-all, but because the complication of the tax code is so difficult that the opportunity that was created with enterprise zones, zeroing out the capital gains tax in poor, distressed communities for anybody to come in and invest, that appealed to his free market mentality, and he believed that that would unleash the incredible potential in folks who lived in those poor communities. And Sean Parker had a very similar thought. And so he came to DC and decided, you know what, I'm going to start a think tank. I'm going to start a think tank called the Economic Innovation Group, and I'm going to charge the Economic Innovation Group with writing the legislation for something that's similar to Kemp's enterprise zones, because Sean knew his history. Now, I apologize, I've already fallen into one of the great Kemp traps. I've talked too much, but I want you to listen while you're eating. I want you to listen to Jack Kemp talk about enterprise zones circa 1980, I think it's 89. Do we have that?
Governor Thompson in Wisconsin calls enterprise zones development zones. Governor Cuomo of New York calls them opportunity zones. We have talked about enterprise zones. Whether it's enterprise zones, opportunity zones, development zones, or job zones, the name or the title is less important than the idea that I think each of you in different ways have expressed here this morning. Creating entrepreneurship, opportunity, jobs, economic activity will lead not only to a healthier tax base for cities and states, in my view, but it would also lead to, if not the only answer, but it's one of the answers to some of the social problems we face. Senator Wellstone talked about entrepreneurship, education, and empowerment. I couldn't have said it better myself. Those are three elements that really, in any democracy, have to be present if people are to realize the upward mobility that has once been associated with the American dream, but that all of a sudden is becoming, if not extinct.
So he could have gone on for a lot longer than that. But wasn't it great to see my pops one more time talking about being in the weeds of tax reform? So it was interesting, you heard him talk about Governor Cuomo in New York. No, that's not the Governor Cuomo today. That was his father, Mario Cuomo. You heard him mention Senator Paul Wellstone, another Democrat. Those days of engagement seem far gone. But today we celebrate a bill that passed with bipartisan support thanks to Senator Tim Scott, who reached across the aisle and brought on co-sponsors. And that still does happen. That is not a mirage. It's still possible. And we have to remember that and hold up that ideal as the way that we want, and we should only vote for politicians who are willing to engage across the aisle and come to solutions. Sean Parker did that, and he created a think tank that had bipartisan economists, and he recognized the pragmatic reality of needing that bipartisanship, but he had the principle correct. And so it is incredible that he was successful in 6 or 7 short years, and there are a lot of factors that go into play. But politics is so distasteful to so many of us today, and we're going to hear about it more tonight. But the reality is that we are politics. We have got to be engaged. We cannot talk about all of them, and you'll hear a lot about them in a little while, but we can't attack them and not take responsibility for ourselves and us and figure out how to better understand other people. And so politics is, it is not the all-consuming thing that many people end up allowing it to be. And I think almost everyone, if not everyone in this room, understands that principle, that politics is not the sole end purpose of life. The goal is to fulfill your God-given promise and potential. And tonight, we're not going to be talking about politics or elections, but we're going to recognize and uphold the ideas and ideals that we consider precious as Americans. Ben Sasse is here. He's going to share reflections on the impact of our rapidly changing society and the outsized impact of politics on community. But before we look to the future, we want to take a moment and look backwards. Tonight we have Kay Coles-James here. Kay is the president of the Heritage Foundation. She was elevated to that position recently after being on the board of the Heritage Foundation for many years. The Heritage Foundation that my dad helped found back in the late 70s. And when Kay took the job at the Heritage Foundation, she explained that the Heritage Foundation stands on certain values or principles. And what makes it easy is that one does not have to navigate, one just has to stand. She asked if she could come stand here tonight with us, and I am so happy that she did, because she's got an incredible story to share and an honor that means so much to the Kemp family. So Kay Coles-James, please come to the stage and welcome Kay. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you.
Good evening. You know, many years ago, when I had the opportunity to be on a stage with my dear friend Jack Kemp, he started out by saying, and I'll bet you there are at least 20 or 30 people in this audience that he said this to, but I promise you when he said it to me, I thought it was only me. And he said, I am a K. James Republican. How many of you have had him say that about you? I know he did. I know he did. And he had a way of making each and every one of us feeling very special. Well, good evening. It is indeed an honor to be here. And for those of you who are supporters of this foundation, I just want to thank you for supporting this very important work. For all of us who know the Kemp family and who knew Jack and who appreciate his legacy, making this possible, making this evening and the work of the foundation possible is so important. At the Heritage Foundation, we have an award. It is the highest award that our Board of Trustees bestows upon anyone. And when I had the privilege of taking over the foundation, and I was given that opportunity in January of last year, as I settled into the office there, I discovered something over on a shelf. And it was a Claire Booth Luce Award. And that particular award, with the date inscribed, was to my dear friend, Jack Kemp. And as it turns out, we were not able to award that to him at that particular time because he passed away about 5 days before it would be bestowed. And it occurred to me that what better place for the Heritage Foundation to recognize the legacy of Jack Kemp and to bestow that honor even upon his death, after his death, posthumously to his family, to let you know the love that we had for him, to let you know how much we appreciate the legacy, and to say to those of you who are supporting this foundation how important the work is that you do. Years ago, I had the opportunity to introduce Jack, and it was the first time that I ever used this particular introduction, and after I did it, he said to me, "Can you follow me around and do that everywhere?" And of course I said it would be my honor. And I just want to share a piece of the particular poem that I used to introduce him that night. And it said, "God give us men a time like this demands, strong minds, great hearts, true faith, and ready hands. Men whom the lust of office does not kill, men whom the spoils of office cannot buy, men who possess opinions and a will. Tall men, sun-crowned, who live above the fog, in public duty and in private thinking." That's what I thought of him then. That's what I believe of him today. And I think that's why we and the Board of Trustees at the Heritage Foundation decided that he so deserved this award. It's a little late in coming, but better late than never. At this time, I'd like to ask Joanne Kemp and Jeff to join me on stage. Well, oh yeah, you get some love too.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Last
It's
time
been a
we
while.
spoke at our dinner.
It was indeed. It was indeed. Well, Joanne, you are truly an American treasure. And we know that none of this would have been possible without you. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Heritage Foundation, we would like to present you with this award so that you would know the love that we feel for you, for your entire family, and for the legacy of Jack Kemp. That's the Sean Parker. This is Thank you so much.
Want to say something wonderful? Thank you, Kay, and thank our Creator and thank all of you for being here for this special occasion. I didn't know this was happening.
This is really special. Kay is a longtime family friend, but an amazing American leader. And I go way back with her myself. She's helped to strengthen marriage, fatherhood, and family for many, many years, something that I devoted my life to. She believes in free speech, and she's given more than one for me.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
I have indeed.
But I'll just give you one thought, and thanks, Kay. You might remember your good friend Bill Bennett. When Dad passed away in 2009, Elaine and Bill Bennett came to our home along with my aunts and uncles and relatives and shared memories about Dad. And most of them were humorous, a number of humorous cracks about Dad. But he said, there's one word that Jack Kemp's whole life represents, and that word is lift. To whatever issue, whatever group of people, whatever location he ever attended, Jack Kemp brought lift, a sunny disposition that the future can be better and we must do what we can to make it better, and we should always help people find their best potential because God made us all special, but we need to escape those base instincts and come together as a team. America is one team. Lift is the word. Take that away tonight. As Sean has done, he's lifting many throughout this nation with those resources that he's been able to enjoy over this life. So whether it's one or millions, let's all lift others. And Kay, thank you so much for this honor.
Thank you.
So Jeff, I'll let you take that. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Kay. Well, we've now come to the part of the program where I get to introduce a great friend of mine, a guy who's about my age and has deep roots in his community. Ben Sasse is a senator from Nebraska. He's rooted in Nebraska, but he has been mobile. He has gotten around to Oxford, to Harvard, to Yale, to Annapolis, Maryland, St. John's College in Annapolis. He's been the youngest president of a university, Midland University in Fremont, Nebraska, close to where he grew up. And he was elected to the Senate recently, and he has never been a politician before. And I think the reason why Ben Sasse was elected and the reason why I went to Nebraska and endorsed him in the primary is because he has an incredible understanding of the principles that undergird this country. He understands the American idea, the reality that the human idea is the American idea given a time and a place to happen. I said that wrong. The American idea is that the human idea is given a time and a place to happen in this country, that we have inalienable rights. And you may remember recently in the hearings in the Senate around our most recent addition to the Supreme Court, Senator Sasse gave us a much-needed civics lesson and reminded us of the importance and reminded the Senate of the importance of the co-equal three branches of government. Senator Sasse has written 2 books, The Vanishing American Adult, and then a book called Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Help Us Heal. I think that's correct. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Ben Sasse.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks to the foundation trustees for having me. Joanne, congratulations. Can I tattle on Jeff for a little while? I'm coming here from a University of Nebraska event, and I'm wearing a Nebraska pin. And Nebraska is the winningest college football team of the last 50 years, in case you don't know. But we've had a bumpy 17 years. we were really good from 50 until 17 years ago, that 33-year run, that it still keeps us as the winningest team, despite the fact that we had an 11-month run from the middle of last year until about 4 weeks ago where we hadn't won a game. And Jeff decided to talk about that off stage. And so I had lots of positive things to say about the whole family. Now I'd like to talk about everybody but Jeff, if that's all right. I'm a former college president, as Jimmy mentioned, and I made a pledge a couple of years ago to some students at Midland University that I would typically start to participate in No Shave November. And I am in No Shave November right now. And because I am a big reader of the Kempian canon, I stumbled across a Kemp quote a couple of weeks ago when I knew I was entering No Shave November and I knew I was going to get to spend 20 minutes with you all here tonight, but I didn't exactly put together that there's this great Jack Kemp line. He says, "Winning is like shaving. You have to do it every day or soon you look like a bum." So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be with you. One last comment before we get to substance. It's a little painful as a football addict. Football is the second most important religion where I'm from, and to be here with the Kemp family and to be in a soccer stadium. And so I would like to just quote Jack Kemp rather than say anything that I myself might say to offend our fine hosts in this soccer stadium. He says, "Football is a picture of democratic capitalism. Soccer is a socialist sport that goes by the same name in many parts of the world." All right, I think we should get to substance because I offended our hosts and they control the microphone. I think it's useful to reflect on the moment that we're at. And by moment, I don't mean 7 days post-election day. I mean our moment as in the last couple of decades and the next couple decades. Where are we in time? Why do things feel so chaotic in our moment? And I think it's important to be honest about both the bad news and the good news of our moment. If we aren't honest about the bad news, because we're living through a really disrupted time and there's a lot of bad, clunky mess around us, if we are not honest about the moment at which we sit, we're not going to be clear-eyed enough to tackle the problems that we face. Simultaneously, if we are not aware of all the opportunities of our moment, we're probably not going to be able to rally enough people to join in a cause to succeed at beating back a bunch of the challenges of our ugly moment. And so I think it's imperative upon us to have a clear-eyed realism about the moment at which we sit, because there's a lot wrong about our time. And whenever you start by sort of, especially in this city, because this is a weird place, there's a lot great about Washington, D.C. for people who are from here, but for a lot of the people who aren't from here, when you come here, there is a fever that people catch, and they forget that this is supposed to be a servant community that maintains a framework for ordered liberty so that all the other places in the country can continue to be the center of life for Americans across 50 states. Because DC is not supposed to be the center of the world, with that asterisk of there's a subset of people who, of the 320 million Americans who are from here, and it should be the center of their world. But for the vast majority of Americans, there shouldn't be a sense that if you live in Vermont or Oregon or New Mexico or Alabama, that DC is the center of the world, and yet increasingly it is. It is in our consciousness and it is in our economics. 5 of the 7 richest counties in America are suburbs that ring Washington, D.C. right now. That would confuse the founders. They wouldn't expect that a river of money would flow from the other 50 states to Washington, D.C. And so when you say, if you're in Washington, we should be honest about the problems we face, most people immediately assume we're now going to talk about politics. So I want to disabuse you of that fact. There's an elephant in the room of every conversation in Washington, D.C. the last 30 to 36 months, and that is, I wonder if secretly this is going to be a Donald Trump speech. My answer is almost entirely no. This is not a speech about the president because the problems of our moment are not new in the last 2 to 3 years. They're decades in the coming. Donald Trump didn't cause the moment that we're at, and Donald Trump can't fix it because politics didn't cause the moment that we're at, and therefore politics can't fix it. And so we should be honest about the fact that a lot of the things that many of the people in this room may be passionate about the president, whether you're pro or anti or mixed or confused or just wish all of politics would go away for a while, the moment we're at in politics is much more symptom of the moment we're at in economics and culture than cause of any of those things. And if we could have that in common, 320 million Americans could start to make progress on lots of other problems if we said, hey, politics is important, but we need to make sure we bracket our politics lest they swallow everything else in our life. And I think in our time, politics are swallowing almost everything else in our life. And yet, when I don't want to do that, I want us to reject the politics of the religion of politics that's happening in our time. What does it mean to say that things are broken? I'll give you a few. Let me give you a speed round. We live at a time where we are not just materially rich, but spiritually poor. We are the richest people in all of human history. There's never been a middle class that has the largesse of Americans right now. Throughout all of human history, there's never been a time or a place with more middle class, super rich people. Sean Parker's super rich. But everybody in America, and stewarding his resources to the good, I wasn't meaning to use you, Sean, as a sort of bully pulpit echo chamber, but I mean middle-class median Americans are the richest people in all of human history, and yet tons of data says we're actually less happy than Americans have been at any point in the last 60 or 70 years. There's almost no literature about what happiness would have looked like 200 years ago or 150 years ago or 100 years ago, but there are some sort of metrics and indices that you can use to think how happy were people. Americans are the richest they've ever been right now, and yet spiritually, we're the most dissatisfied. That's pretty weird, and it's pretty troubling. We have an epidemic of loneliness in our time. We have cut in half the number of friends the average American has in the last 27 years. I graduated high school in 1990. The average American had 3.2 friends. Today, the average American has 1.8 friends, half as many. 43% of Americans have either zero or only one confidant. Think about that. Almost half of our neighbors have either zero or one person that they ever talk to about anything important. That's horrific. We have a statistical collapse of the nuclear family in America right now. I'm the second or third most conservative voter in the US Senate, but I sit in Daniel Patrick Moynihan's desk on the Senate floor on purpose. A bunch of reasons why, but one of them is because Moynihan is the author of both the famous quote, you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And he's also the author of a report on the collapse of the black nuclear family in the 1960s. And at that point, the out-of-wedlock birth rate in America overall was 6%, and in the black community, it hit between 22 and 25%. Today, in America, without regard to race, 59% of all babies born to women under 30 have almost no relationship with their dad. A majority of the little boys and girls in our country right now are being raised in a situation that can be defined as fatherless. There is no bigger challenge in our time or in any other point in American history. We have very little sense of we in America. There is a collapse of trust, not just in politics. It's easy to talk about Congress's approval rating at 9% or 12%. Jimmy mentioned that I'm a first-time politician. I think I'm one of 8 people in the Senate who's never run for anything before. And when we were running for office, my wife saw some of the data that said 9 to 12% of Americans have a favorable view of Congress. And she was not surprised that it was so low. She said, who are these 9 to 12 people, 9 to 12%, and how do we disabuse them of this fact? So they live in a reality-based world. The public distrust numbers in Congress are only one institution. The declining trust of Americans in our institutions has been ramping since before Watergate and right about Watergate, but pretty consistently. There have been a few moments where there's been a bit of an improvement, but overall the trend line for the last half century is toward Americans trusting less and less in almost every institution. We have growing income inequality in our time. We have a resurgence of class. Right now, there are 2 Americas. If you live in a house where mom or dad graduated from college, you are one of the 31%. You are in the 31% of America, and among the other 69% of America, where either your home is broken and the one parent raising you didn't go to college, or neither of the 2 parents in your house went to college, almost every other statistical indicator you can look at about economic attainment, about the likelihood of your marriage being stable, about incarceration rates, about economic sustenance, about assets in your family, almost everything is different between the 31% and the 69%, and there's no more significant variable than whether or not you're a part of that elite 31%. Family breakdown in that bottom 2/3 is off the charts, and it's completely different sets of social and familial experiences if you're in that upper 31%, and we have decreasing intermarriage across that educational attainment line. We have rapidly declining sense of hope about the future. That's new in America. In almost all of American history, people have always believed that the future would be better for their kids and grandkids than it was for their parents and grandparents. That's new. DC can't do even basic things, not just get basic legislation passed. We've had a budget 4 times in the last 39 years in DC. But DC can't even agree on the most basic facts about the nature of the problem we face. We're looking at the politicization of even bench-keeping organizations, like the way we talk about budgets and scorekeeping. In American foreign policy, we look to be doing something, since this weekend was the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, we look to be doing something now that's akin to what happened at the end of World War I. We won World War I, we lost the peace. We won World War II, and we built the greatest period of economic prosperity and political stability that the global order has ever known. We then won the Cold War, and we've been losing the post-Cold War era, and Americans decreasingly even believe that America is any different than Russia. Russia wants to sow chaos among all their near neighbors, and they want us to believe that we don't have any different values. And by the way, the problem here is not the Russian people, it's Putin and his oligarchs. But their effort to undermine our belief in our own institutions and in the fact that realism and idealism often do move in tandem in the US. We are not the global beat cop, but we certainly do believe, as Jimmy said, in not just the universal dignity and the God-given rights of 320 million Americans. We believe in the universal dignity of 7.5 billion people across this globe. It isn't America's job to secure everything for those 7.5 billion people, but it is most certainly America's job, in part, to trumpet the virtue and the dignity of those 7.5 billion people. Almost all statistical indicators show that Americans are less and less sure of that. As you look at all these things, and then you see what happens in our politics in response, we should, and I'm going to get back to good news here in a hurry, we should recognize that what happens in elections over the course of the last 2 or 3 cycles, and again, this is not, I'm no Larry Sabato or Charlie Cook, so I'm not going to give you political analysis, but we should be able to recognize that it isn't just Twitter that's a political cesspool. And by the way, sometimes people join Twitter and then later they want to declare independence from Twitter, and so they condemn all of Twitter. We should distinguish between the different types of Twitter. Sports Twitter is an eschatological gift from the heavens, right? To watch a football game and be connected to instant data where you don't just have to listen to the play-by-play guy or gal when they ever get around to giving you which, but being able to dual screen with your friends and pay attention. Political Twitter is a cesspool. It's demonic. But sports Twitter is an inbreaking of the age that is yet to come. Heaven comes via sports Twitter. But what Twitter on politics really is it's a picture of the most broken narcissism of the human soul that says, I don't have to empathize with somebody that comes from a different circumstance or has a different set of views than I do. I can have insta-certainty about absolutely every issue instantly. You can know everything when you're on political Twitter, and you can condemn all the other bad guys. And one of the things that we see happening in our politics is not that Twitter is weird as an outlier, but that our politics look like they want to become more like Twitter. And so I'll give you just a couple of real quick data points. The gender resegmentation of American politics. Republicans, and here I'm going to talk macro civics and macro community for our whole time together, with the one carve out at this moment. I'll say something and I'll admit that I'm wearing my partisan hat. So if you're on the other side of the aisle, just flip the numbers. But Republicans have traditionally had a gender challenge with women that for about 40 to 50 years has been between 4 and 8 points per election cycle. Republicans are 4 to 8 points less popular with women than with men. Currently, 32. Men are +8 on the president, women are -24. Race. We are segmenting our politics along racial lines in rapidly resorting new ways. Educational attainment. All sorts of numbers you could crunch from the election 2 years and 2 days ago to 7 days ago. And what you see is massive resegmentation of the American electorate along educational attainment lines. Geography. This is a new thing in American politics, to be as likely to tell who somebody's going to vote for based on their density of their neighborhood. When you get to 800 people per square mile, you flip from being a Republican to a Democrat, and it's one of the most significant drivers of how you're going to vote right now. Well, if you're in my party and you see that America is recentering around 100 to 150 metro regions, and you look at Republican popularity in those regions, trying to just turn out more rural vote, and by the way, I'm here to happily debate the virtues of the city and the virtues of the country with everybody, but I want you to come and live with me in rural Nebraska, because my kid brings back a dead animal every day. There is nothing better for 7-year-old boys on earth than to live where I live. And yet, the politics of the time that says, our party can just my party can be comfortable with just more and more rural vote, that doesn't work in the long term. But here's the more important thing than where you are on the partisan spectrum. It's the one step up question at the level of civics. What does it mean when America's political parties are segmenting along gender lines, along race lines, along geographic density lines, along educational attainment lines, along geographic lines? None of that is good. None of that is a nation or a republic that looks at the human condition and says, oh, politics are kind of important because as sinners in a broken world, we need to make sure we have a framework for ordered liberty so the really important stuff can happen at a Kemp Foundation dinner or at your dinner table. But as all that other stuff is breaking, it turns out the dinner table is actually breaking as well. In the last 20 years, the average American family has gone from hosting 14 times a year to hosting 8 times a year. If you've read Robert Putnam's stuff going back 20 years to Bowling Alone or 3 years ago to Our Kids, what you find is it isn't just individuals that have fewer friends. The Little League is actually in statistical collapse in America. And the socioeconomic sorting that happens as elite kids start to play travel sports and they don't go to the neighborhood sports anymore, what happens is if a local baseball league requires 15 teams and 2 or 3 or 4 of those teams all of a sudden are down from 15 kids to 11 kids to 10 kids to 9 kids, poof. It isn't just that their team dies, the whole Little League dies. And this is happening across America in our time, and people know that there's something fundamentally wrong, and they don't know what it is, and what they're told is, if only we did more politics, maybe we could sort this out. I'm here to suggest to you that the Kemp Foundation is much more the solution to what America needs, and by the Kemp Foundation, I mean Tocquevillian America. I mean what China and Russia already understand better than we do, about the fact that America has to be a place where people regard the community that they come from as filled with thick souls of other people that are way more important than their policy preferences or their political voting patterns. What China and Russia know, is what Abraham Lincoln said in the 1830s, which is that America will never, ever be defeated by military might. All the nations of Europe will never be able to drink from the Ohio River. The only way that America ever dies, the only way that any great republic ever dies, is by suicide. And what Americans are starting to do as we hollow out a lot of those first and second and third and fourth order identities and allow politics to substitute for those identities is we're abandoning an American conception of our neighbors as ensouled beings. We're doing something that Putin and his cronies could never do on their own, and we're deciding to do it to ourselves. And by the way, Russia is not really the challenge. The future of when China runs information operations against us is going to make Russia look like scout team offense. Everything that Russia is doing to us, when Jimmy said at the beginning, and he talked about D.C., Washington, and what a voice, by the way, I don't know where he went. But when he talked about the anthem controversy, the anthem controversy is really important. The anthem is really important. The debate about policing in our communities is really important. But one thing that's also really important that most Americans haven't paid much attention to yet, because our political leadership in this country, and I mean across both branches and both parties, is so short-termist and so broken. One of the things that happened when we had the anthem controversy ramping last September is in the 72 hours after it started, the fastest 2 trending hashtags in America were hashtag stand for the anthem and hashtag take a knee NFL. Both of them were majority Russian. Both sides of the anthem controversy were majority Russian. Do you know what Putin wants to do? He wants to divide us on racial lines. He wants to divide us on gender lines. He wants to divide us on geographic lines. He wants to say, you should regard whatever recount is happening in this election as the most important thing happening in your life. Well, you know what? It's not true. It's not true. And I can tell you right now that the vast majority of our neighbors would be a lot better off, 320 million Americans, the vast majority of us would be a lot better off if we turned off all of the screaming chyrons at the bottom of our news channel of choice for the next 18 to 24 months. I can tell you what the headlines are going to be. We're not going to pass any legislation. We're going to scream at each other a lot. We're going to hate each other more at the end. 90% of us, or all of us, would be better off if 90% of the time we turned off the screaming chyron that 5 times a day tells us there's some breaking news, which is like 100 times more breaking news than any mom and dad trying to raise kids actually needs today. And we turned on a lot more wisdom literature. At our house, we've decided to do more political news fasting, and we read more C.S. Lewis, more Tolkien, where we've been reading the Little House on the Prairie series, back reference to the fact that we have dead animals on our porch at least every day. And if we do that, what we have a chance to do is realize that a lot of our neighbors down the street, and this is the good news, a lot of the neighbors down the street actually are human beings. And they believe lots of things that are way more important than their policy preferences. And it turns out this is what Alexis de Tocqueville told Americans about ourselves in the 1830s and 40s. Tocqueville came to America to try to describe us back to the French. And he said, these people are weird because we thought they were religious zealots living at the frontier of the earth. And it turns out they ended up creating lots and lots of economic opportunity as well. We got the principled pluralism thing, but where did the economic opportunity come from? He said, these Americans tend to have a whole bunch of group projects. Why would they have group projects when their government had almost, at that point, 1830s and 40s, no capacity in Washington, D.C.? He said, I went to D.C. to find the meaning of America, and I found this uninhabitable swamp that people really didn't live in like 6 or 7 months out of the year. Not a lot's changed. And he said, I decided to then go out and find where the center of America was. And so he went out to state capitals. He visited 17 of the 25 then state capitals. And he wrote back to Europe and he said, I found the meaning of America. It's the Kemp Foundation. He wrote back and he said, I found the Rotary Club. I found the Little League. I found the volunteer fire department. He said, we Europeans thought there was a continuum between isolated individualism and state-driven community. It turns out Americans have this completely third category. They have this idea of community that's done by voluntarism, that's done by love, that's done by persuasion. And it turns out almost everything interesting in America has always been built. Sometimes government's been involved. Sometimes there's a public-private partnership. But almost everything interesting that's ever been built in America has been built by groups, not just individuals, been built by groups, but been built by groups that persuaded people. If you look at political Twitter, what is the thing you never really find? You don't find any attempt to persuade, because the echo chamber that I'm in and the echo chamber that I'm against, these are already predetermined things. These aren't whole human beings as we process it. What they are is people to scream at or to own or to put down, or people that we can put down for the sake of the echo chamber and the adulation and the likes that we get. The digital revolution is going to create lots and lots of new challenges. There is no doubt. The segmenting by class, the new educational challenges of our time. Jack Kemp sometimes referred to K-12 education as the civil rights issue of our time. The fact that the agenda before us is going to include not just cyber war against China, but figuring out what coding looks like as a new kind of language that almost every American is going to need to be able to understand to navigate the job disruptions that come at age 40 and 45 and 50 and 55. We need a new project for the future of higher education in America. Since we have a tech genius in the room, we need a new project that's for the tech community and speech. We need a new project that's social capital for declining rural America. We need new projects that's social capital for suburban exurbanizing America, where lots of people have really big square footage and very little communal connection to their neighbors. It turns out statistically, if you go from 200 to 500 social media friends or 500 to 1,000, you don't get any happier. If you go from 2 to 3 human friends, you get lots happier. There's empirical data on this. If you know the person that lives 2 doors down from you, knowing her is actually statistically correlated to your happiness. We're going to need new kinds of social capital experiments that are on the order of what happened in the progressive era. I don't chiefly mean the politics, but I mean all the new institution building that happened during urbanization, industrialization. All of these big challenges of our time are really, really fascinating. There's going to be more total economic output in our time and place than has ever happened in all of human history, and the chance for that to redound to middle-class Americans and across the globe is huge. And yet, the disruption is really scary. And if we succumb to the idea that we can have a politics-first worldview, we're not just going to lie to our neighbor because it's not going to be true. We're not just going to betray our history because this has never been the American idea that Washington and politics are the center of the world, but we're also not possibly going to be able to navigate the challenges of our time and place. On the other hand, if we do decide that our neighbors, our moms and dads and religionists and neighbors and workers and venture capitalists at the local level, if we believe they're all of these things, also progressives or conservatives or Republicans or Democrats, but that the more important things are the wholly ensouled things about their time, then we can affirm some really basic things about the American creed. We can say with our forefathers and mothers that we should define compassion not by the number of people receiving government benefits, but by the number of people no longer needing government benefits. If we believe in the American creed, we could say things like, a team requires unity because you don't win alone and you don't lose alone. A team or a family or a nation rises and falls together. We could say things from the American creed like, when our neighbors lack jobs and opportunity and prosperity, they will then have no stake in their communities, and they'll act like they have no stake in their communities. And by the way, if you're not fully versed in the Kempian book of optimism, all of these lines, and the reason I'm looking down is because these are Jack Kemp quotes. I want to give you 2 more. There is no limit to what free men and women with free markets can accomplish when they are free to follow and build their own dreams. A bad idea can never be beaten by anything except a good idea. You can never beat a bad idea with just more politics. You can never just run over them and be left with a republic at the end. And finally, there is only one race, and it's the human race. We are all brothers and sisters in America. And if we're going to navigate this time and place, we will do it by believing there is only one race, the human race, for we are all brothers and sisters in America. To all of you who've invested your labors in honoring Jack Kemp's legacy and trying to pass it on to the next generation of free republic by working at the Kemp Foundation and through all the little Tocquevillian platoons of Kemp Foundations in your neighborhood, Godspeed, and thanks for having me.
Thanks. Appreciate it. So you can tell that Ben has been to a lot of schools. He's been studying. He knows the statistics. And he's right. This is a scary time. But most importantly, this is a time for the food to come out. And so servers, while I'm talking, I want the servers to please bring the meals out. Great. They're coming. You all are going to be served. And Ben, thank you for your remarks. I do want to say something. I think it's important to understand that part of what we believe in most deeply, one of the main programs of the Jack Kemp Foundation is the Kemp Forum. The Kemp Forum is a debate and discussion series providing a platform for the civil competition of ideas. The civil competition of ideas. And we all have different perspectives. But we have got to be able to engage in that competition of ideas. And Senator Sasse, thank you for competing. And I would say that you are uniquely positioned to help us address many of those problems. And I know you are. We want to encourage you and help you. And Senator Todd Young, who's here, Larry Kudlow from the White House, Ivanka, city councilmen who are here, we want to help you accomplish something like Sean Parker accomplished. we want to share our ideas. We want to be engaged with you. And here's the thing, the Kemp Forum, the Kemp Foundation exists to develop, engage, and recognize exceptional leaders who champion the American idea. We can disagree, and Ben, when you talk about the challenges, where my mind went, and you closed with some of my dad's great quotes, but one of the interesting things in the Kemp optimistic perspective is that Dad loved to talk about his time in the huddle. And he would often say that no quarterback worth his salt ever went into a huddle and said, all right, guys, I don't know, they're really big over there. I'm not sure this play has ever worked before. I don't know if this is going to work, but hey, let's give it a try, right? That's not what a quarterback does. And knowing, you got to know the defense. And Senator Sasse just laid out a description of the defense and the issues that are out there, and it is a complicated world. But the good news is that we have hope. We have hope that our Creator has created us with purpose and with creativity to think about solutions and to get the policies right that need to be gotten right, because yes, politics does matter and it is a high calling, and we shouldn't attack politicians. We should be a part of the solution. So at the Kemp Foundation, and specifically through our Kemp Forum, and you're going to hear a little bit later tonight from Todd Ricketts, the Kemp Forum on Expanding Opportunity is where our program really started. And in 2016, we had a Kemp Forum on Expanding Opportunity in South Carolina. That led to Todd Ricketts asking us to come to Chicago. And while you're being served and starting to eat, but before you start talking to your table, you'll have time for that, I would like you to turn your attention to the screen. And this is a video clip of the Kemp Forum on Expanding Opportunity. It just so happens it was in another sports stadium at Wrigley Field, and we had an engaging discussion, and this will give you a glimpse of what we do at the Jack Kemp Foundation. Please roll the Kemp Forum video. I'm grateful for all of you being here and engaging in this conversation. I look forward to what's coming out of it.
What is the current status of distressed communities?
A lot of economic deprivation, a lot of violence, a broken educational system.
What's missing the most is economic empowerment, and not just jobs, but the ability for people to own the means of economic mobility. You can't build what you can't see, and so before you have ownership, you have to also have the values of dignity.
Where do you all want to see the needle move?
Having mentors is huge, because if you're not getting that support at home, you need to have your support somewhere, right?
What kind of things have you seen that work? Like, what do we need to pour more gasoline on the fire?
It would serve this country if we take the time to study what has already worked, rather than just going out on our own, trying to invent something.
Investing in a community generally ends up as gentrification. So what we did was, before we attracted the new investment, we began home ownership training, we began job training with the people who were already there to ensure that the new investment that we wanted to come in didn't make a new facade and run the people out.
The lesson I've learned, you've got to respect the fact that people on the ground locally know a thing or two, and that there are people on the ground locally who have been out there fighting, making a difference, and they're successful. And so we don't have to sit in cold buildings in Washington and reinvent the wheel and tell everybody we know more than they do about their communities. We got to find the people who actually are doing a really good job and get behind them and back them. And then what we ought to do is measure what works. So we measure our efforts on fighting poverty and distressed communities based on outcomes and results. Are we actually getting at root causes? Are we actually getting people persistently out of poverty?
So that's an example of what we do with our Kemp Forum events, and your support goes a long way towards helping us do that. We are now going to start our dinner service. Hopefully many of you have plates. If you don't yet, they're coming. Let the servers come bring you food. This is a Kemp event. We go a little bit long. We're going to get back on track, back on time, and get you out of here. But we got some great things coming, and we appreciate your being here. Enjoy your dinner and your table, and I'll be back soon. Thank you.